I'm Carol Klein, and this is my garden nestled in the heart of North Devon, 15 miles from the coast and surrounded by this tranquil and beautiful countryside. I've taken care of my garden for 30 years. I know every inch of this place and every plant. Each season brings its own delights. There are plenty of challenges too, but that's what makes it so exciting and so fulfilling. Over the next half hour, I want to share with you the huge transition my garden makes as it passes from winter into spring. March and April is a time of huge changes in my garden, in any garden. This time of the year starts with the remnants of winter. Cold, brown, dank, gloomy. But it ends in the middle of spring. Moments of apprehension and despair are replaced with feelings of hope, and it all happens within a matter of weeks. It's a really busy time in the garden. Clearing the last of the debris and detritus, which makes way for waves of planting. Every day's frenetic, there's never enough time. And crucially, all pruning must be done by the end of March. But one of the most exciting bits of all is sowing my first seeds of the year. Although, I suppose chronologically, as far as official calendars are concerned, the year starts in January. To me, my gardening year really starts with sowing these first seeds. I always find it, no matter how many times I do it, an extremely exciting activity. It's a great leap of faith, I suppose, to put this little seed into a tray or a pot and believe that it's going to turn itself into a plant. This is Nicotiana Langsdorffii. Langsdorffii is this gorgeous pale green. It's got blue anthers. Now, although that's just a pinch of seed, there's probably 100 plants in there. Sometimes you'll get a mass of poppy seed and you think, oh, I'll bung them all in because they're bound to work like that. But don't. It doesn't work because your seedlings are so close when they start to grow that they're very prone to damping off. Here comes the cat. So make your sowing fairly sparse. I always just put grit over the top. It retains the moisture. It keeps any sort of weed seeds from germinating, not that, well, from flying in really. There won't be any in the compost because it's sterile. It's another reason why you shouldn't use your own compost off the compost heap. It's full of pathogens and weed seedlings, so it's not a good idea at all. And then label. So, with some idea of the date too. So March will do. Nicotiana Langsdorffii. Now afterwards I'm going to stand this whole lot in water because I love them to imbibe the water from underneath, because that actually pulls the seed down into intimate contact with the compost. So I'll tell you what, let's sow one of these big seeds. Something like Cerinthe. Now station sowing just means quite simply sowing one seed at a time, so it's got its own individual place. massive garden one week, and it's almost bare. There are just a few shoots here and there. You look the next week and everything is thrusting forwards. Within a matter of weeks, everywhere's green. Annie's border is finally back in order. All the plants that were taken out have now been divided and replanted. All I've got to do is to give them some love. Sometimes you can give a plant all the love it needs, but nature always has the last word. The winter was so harsh it killed my beloved Astelia. It had grown to such a size that I had to get my husband Neil in to help. Is it out?
Yeah.
You all right?
Yeah.
I'm going for this tree through here. Well, this is the scene of a terrible tragedy, but also a wonderful opportunity. I'm going to plant this gorgeous Amelanchier, snowy Mespelis, and it's going here in place of our lovely Astelia. This was just such a magnificent specimen, wasn't
it's
it?
beautiful. About that big, wasn't it?
It was, at least.
Yeah, never be the same again.
It was magnificent, wasn't it, really?
Yeah.
That's the thing about gardening, isn't it? When something reaches its time, it's better just to take it out.
And start again with something else.
Yeah, and the tree roots grow outwards anyway, don't they?
It's very clayey, isn't it? So I'll get some compost.
Yeah, do. That's lovely compost, isn't it? This Amelanchier, it's called La Paloma, the dove. And it's a real beaut, and it's been grafted onto a rootstock. And you can hardly see the join now, but I must make sure that it's planted dead level there, because I don't want any of that graft under the ground. And isn't it a beautiful shape, this tree? It's so lovely. Thank you very much. Brilliant roots. I don't need to tease them out or anything, because it's just going to find its way here. And I want to plant it so it's going to be just level with the soil. So I think dig a bit more out for us, Neil, please. Just a bit from the middle, that's it. Very heavy soil, isn't it? But it's got shillet underneath it, so it's going to drain really well. That's it. And just move it around a bit. That's it. What I don't want it to do is put a bit back. Put a bit of that compost in. Lovely, ideal. And this is our own compost, isn't it? Homegrown at Glebe. A few weeks ago, the only colour in the garden was a bit of green, and then white, with snowdrops everywhere. But now they've gone. They're already setting seed and the foliage is growing. They've been replaced by all these sparkling bits of jewel-like colours. Pulsatilla and these soft little violets seeded themselves. And it's almost like you had to be introduced to colour gradually. You've got not a kaleidoscope of colour, not yet, but you've got all these beautiful little sparkly bits everywhere. It's typical March weather. The sun's been shiny, it's been raining, it can't make its mind up. This part of the garden, it's the brick garden. At long last, I've managed to start tidying it up and clearing the debris. And at the same time, because the weather is just right for it now, I've had the opportunity to start dividing plants, especially those that flower really late in the year. And I want to start with this Helenium. Now, I've got 3 big clumps right the way through here, but they are clumps and they've been here for a few years now. I think if you use a plant in different places around the garden, it gives the whole thing sort of integrity, you know, some cohesion. Now, the great thing about dividing heleniums, even if they're in cleggy soil like this is, they pretty well do it for themselves. You can use the old stems as levers to sort of prise it apart, but you don't need a lot of prizing really. Look at that, a perfect little rosette. So that's one plant. You can swish the soil off these if you want to in a bucket so you can see what you're doing. But look, it's got a really good root system, and I can replant that straight away. And when I do, that's the old bit, that's no good at all. That's useless now. And when I plant these new bits, I shall put them in, you know, 5 or 7 at a time. So I make a nice big clump, and I can plant them in whatever sort of shape I want. It's a wonderful feeling to know that you've given a plant what it needs, and to watch it expand and do its own thing, to be itself. That's what I love to do. Yes, we're going for a nice walk. Come this way. You know, when somebody asks you what's your favourite flower, it's so difficult to answer, but I think this has got to be mine, the primrose. It's so typical of Devon, of the place I live, and it's just such a perfect sort of simple kind of flower. And I love everything about it. I love these pale, pale flowers and little fine pink stems and this deep egg yolk centre. And I've got it all over the place in my garden at home now. But when I started off, I just bought one plant from a wildflower nursery. And from that, I've grown generation after generation of them. You just can't have too many of them. And it's such a simple and yet exciting kind of process, because as these petals begin to fade, the seed pod expands and it turns into a little fat sphere, and it's bright green. And the seed within it is bright green too, but it's completely fertile and ready to sow. And you just take off a seed head and you pop it with your thumbnails. You pop this sort of membrane that surrounds it, and you push out these seeds again with your thumbnail because they're a bit sticky, and wipe them on the surface of compost in a seed tray. And you just cover it with grit, water it from underneath, stand it outside, and within a matter of weeks, these little plants will start to germinate. And very often, they'll flower the year after you've sown that seed. I keep deluding myself that I'm going to get everything done during daylight hours, but even though, you know, it's the end of March now and we've got so much more daylight, I'm still finding that I'm spending all these evenings in the potting shed. But I don't mind spending a very intimate time with this plant. These are some of my most treasured possessions. They're big, fat, huge eucomis bulbs. It's one called Sparkling Burgundy, and it's got these deep, rich sort of purple leaves, or it will have. They're all inside there, waiting to shoot upwards. And I always keep them in pots. You can grow it outside, but they're so sort of important to me that I always want to show them how special they are. But I just want to pop this on now into a bigger pot lovely rich compost, so the whole thing is going to get bigger and more bountiful. I'm going to put them back in the greenhouse afterwards, and then I'm going to bring them out as they start to shoot and these big purple sprouts come upwards. Bit of grit on the top, I think. It's not just the garden taking up our time at the moment. We're doing some major work on the cottage. Still, the scaffolding has come in handy.
We used to have barn owls, a pair of barn owls here about 30 years ago. I'm trying to encourage whatever barn owls are around to come back and raise a new generation. So I built a little barn owl box for them, trying to do everything I can to encourage them. So we just have to wait and see and hope if they approve or not.
I can feel its heart beating. I just found it in the kitchen, fluttering about looking for a new home. But I think it's going to be all right. Look at those beautiful steely blue feathers. All that way you've come. Yeah. Well, it's April. It's tulip time. What gardener could resist growing tulips? I certainly can't. Even though I haven't got the right sort of soil for growing them. What tulips need is light, alkaline, free-draining soil, baking in hot sun. I've got the opposite sort of conditions. You know, it's very heavy clay, slightly on the acid side. That's why I grow them in pots. If they're going to flower to their very, very best, need a period of cold. So I keep the pots up on the top terrace here. And as they begin to flower, I carry them off, quite triumphantly, to different parts of the garden. And although I adore them when they're at their peak, I also love, even with a little sadness, the way they begin to fade. I love it when these petals start to fall and you see the stigma, the ovary inside, and it has its own beautiful geometry. And to me, they sort of signify that whole thing about gardening. You know, each plant has its time. This box hedge in my hotboard has been bothering me for a bit. Although it's well established, it really needs bringing under control. But instead of just giving it a conventional prune, I want something special. We're getting somebody in today who's going to elevate this hedge into art, isn't he? He's going to cloud prune it. But first of all, you're in charge here. I want to show you something down this end. I really want you to see. Just in this corner, I'm being very quiet. A hedge sparrow, a little dunnock, has built her nest. And it's perfect, absolutely perfect. And there are several bright turquoise eggs in there, but there's one chick who's hatched with this big orange beak. So I think when Jake comes to cut this hedge, we're going to leave this bit. Cloud pruning's a real craft. Jake Hobson studied different pruning styles and techniques all around the world, so I can't wait to see what he's going to suggest for my hedge. Oh, hello.
Hi, Carol.
You're Jake, I presume?
Yep.
Just getting ready for you. Gosh, you're tall. I bet that comes in handy, doesn't it, when you're doing
Good for pruning.
Yeah, on these tall hedges. Well, this isn't so big, is it? Did you get a good look at it on the way up?
It's great, yeah. Yeah, no, it's looking lovely and healthy and dense and bushy.
But I don't know about formal cloud pruning. I mean, I want it to be, it was supposed to be a big sort of organic line linking one side with the other, and I want it to fit in with the countryside all around.
Yeah, it should be sort of natural and organic looking with
Yeah.
just a little bit of definition to it and nothing too strong or dramatic. And I've got some pictures here. We've got several different pictures here. This is a yew hedge in Shropshire,
That's beautiful.
which is sort of English-style cloud pruning, and that's probably hundreds of years old.
It's sort of lumpy, isn't it? It's
Lumpy and organic and
Yeah.
melted, yeah.
It's gorgeous.
We've got a nice Japanese azalea. I'll show you. Well, that's some Filaria latifolia.
Right.
It's a Mediterranean plant.
It looks sort of, I don't know, doesn't look as country-ish as
No,
this.
well, these are all a bit more intentional, and that's
Yeah.
box, of course.
Yeah.
But then we've got, well, here, that's Japanese azalea
Right.
in Kyoto, which
Yeah.
is treated the same as box. But
That's beautiful, isn't it? All these shapes sort of tucked into one another.
it's lovely. And I think a combination of those two,
Yeah.
with a few little details like this, and then some
Yeah.
general sort of sweeps like that.
So where do you think we ought to start then?
Well, I think if we get stuck in here, it should be
Yeah.
a good place to
Put your
start. Yeah.
photos away and-
Okie dokes.
Am I going to get to have a go as well?
Oh yeah, definitely. I'd start off with a pair of secateurs, just roughing out the shape like a stone carver would, just sort of
Right.
finding the basic shape inside. So a good pair of secateurs, and just
Right.
taking out the
big woody
the
growth.
big woody growth. So if we start off down here maybe, and we
Yeah.
could just take a few of those off like that. And it's always good to cut to a point where there's some small side branches. So if that's the final cut, you've still got some foliage showing.
Yeah, so
we
this
know
is
that-
coming up there.
That's
like
right.
that.
Yeah, nice sweep there. So we've got a nice bulge here.
I mean, can you get the same sort of shape and definition with something like box as you can with you?
Yeah, absolutely. It works just the same. Small foliage is what you want
Yeah.
for this kind of pruning. Ideally, you do this in the autumn or the spring before it's come into full growth. And this is just
Yeah.
starting to grow now, so we're not.
It's just starting to regrow. I mean, we're quite late, really, aren't we? this
Yeah,
year?
it's pretty good timing. We don't want to lose any of the growth that we would have had. So we'll now have 6 or 8 weeks of furious growth.
Right.
And it will work pretty well.
Well, while Jake's finishing that off, I've borrowed his wonderfully sharp, beautiful secateurs to do a job that I've been meaning to do for ages and ages. Oh. It's this Cotoneaster here. It's horizontalis, and I think it's really beautiful the way it sort of swoops forward over this wall, and it kind of replicates or echoes the shapes that Jake's cut into the hedge, but it doesn't know its place. It's evergreen, this, so you can see it all the time, and it keeps on growing. And what it's done is invade this space. It's really trying to take over. In this case, it's taking the mickey, because what I don't want it to do is spoil that glorious pulsatilla. I mean, just look at that. The sun shone just so we can appreciate it. This is a high alpine, and you can just tell it's perfectly at home in this situation. And first of all, its flowers are upright like that, and then gradually they'll fall over until it's pollinated, and then the stem lengthens and becomes erect. By this time, these silky seed heads have started to change to fluff, and later on, when a windy day, all those seed will be carried away on these beautiful little gossamer parachutes. I think that's just such a brilliant job. It's beautiful.
Oh, thanks.
I mean, look how it echoes these cumulus, doesn't it?
Yeah, doesn't it? Yeah.
It really does. And all sort of blowing this way. It's wonderful. How often am I going to have to maintain it, Jane?
Well, traditionally people clip box once a year in June, sort of Derby Day, something
Yeah.
like that. But I think for you it'd be easier to clip in the autumn
Yes.
when you can get access is easier.
So once a year, I don't need to feed it because it's growing so vigorously anyway,
It should be
isn't
fine,
it?
yep.
In fact, I might have to restrict it a bit and put some
Slow it
slate
down
in
a
the
bit.
ground. But it's a truly lovely job. It's wonderful. Is this bit for me?
I left that for you. Do you want to have a go?
Yeah, I do.
Here you go.
I feel as though I'm naming a ship or something. So, right the way across here.
Yeah.
One. Look at that. You've got to do this with a flourish, haven't you? April's a real time for trees. Everything's beginning to come out. You see these buds bursting open. But I think my favourites of all have to be my two magnolias. This one's Leonard Messel, has deep sort of lilac buds, and then they open to these much paler water lily sort of flowers. And up at the top near the house I've got Magnolia stellata. It's of epic proportions and it's smothered in literally thousands of flowers. They were around perhaps 100 million years ago. They were in existence before bees, so they don't produce any nectar at all. They're pollinated by beetles, and you'll often see a disappointed bee flying away from there. In complete contrast to the levity of the magnolia, my dark trilliums are at their best during April. This is Trillium chloropetalum, and it's sort of dark and dangerous. It's a wonderful plant and very, very long-lived, but it takes a whole 7 years to grow it from seed to flowering. Well worth it, though. Just look at these lovely little cerinthe. They're beautiful plants now. These are the ones I sowed from seed just a few weeks ago, and already they've made strong, robust little plants. They've got wonderful sort of root systems, and they're ready to have their own little homes in these pots to grow on and grow up into big plants. And these Nicotiana. This is Langsdorffii, the one with those gorgeous long green trumpety flowers. They've made true leaves, and very delicately now I'm just going to get my chopstick and prick them out into little seed trays. I mean, you can't believe the way that the garden has changed in the last few weeks. We've had the most terrible weather to begin with, but you know, when we started these 2 months, everything was bare and bleak. You really felt some days a sense of disillusionment, like nothing was going to grow. But now look at it. And what's next? May, my favourite time. It's froth time in the garden. You know, if this is the time of sort of hope and growth and everything getting going, then May is the time when you just celebrate.